Welcome to the Dashboard Effect podcast. I'm Brick Thompson.
And I'm Landon Oaks.
Landon, we wanted to talk in this episode about simplicity in designing dashboards and why often it might seem like a complex looking dashboard with lots of colors and lots of visualizations and all sorts of things going on is a higher value dashboard than one that is simple, maybe has 3 or 4 or 5 visualizations and a couple of bright KPIs. Often that simple one is actually far more value, or brings far more value and is a lot more valuable for the company. And it's not intuitive why that would be. You know, when we think about designing dashboards here, our analytics engineers are trying to figure out how do they get the information to the viewer as intuitively as possible. You know, sometimes we say, could you show it to your elderly grandparent? And they would know maybe not exactly what's going on in the business, but they definitely would know how it's going. And so the business user is able to look at it and really quickly infer how it's going, and it can drive decisions and actions quickly. Those are the dashboards that end up getting adopted well by businesses and actually giving ROI. But there's sort of an unexpected thing, which is those simple dashboards are often the most complex to put together behind the scenes. And so I thought we'd just talk about a couple examples of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, to your point, the simpler, the better. And I have a bit of this problem where, it's very easy for me to ignore all the dashboards and work on my day-to-day work. But I have this one specific one, really, really simple, that just simply shows me how much hours my team logged and what they should have. I reference it all the time because I look at it for about 2 minutes.
And it very quickly whether they're meeting utilization targets and that type of thing. Yeah. So you can have a simple dashboard. We went and looked for a couple of examples of what might look simple but take a lot behind the scenes. One of the ones that we did for a client one time was a Salesperson ROI Dashboard. And so they wanted to be able to see how was a new salesperson performing against an expected baseline over their first 36 months in the business. And one of the complicated things they had was that the new salesperson often inherited existing accounts from a departed salesperson or someone that moved to a different division or group. And the logic to make that work correctly so that you could give the new person credit for the old person's sales and show that correctly on the, sort of the line chart against the baseline, and give good numbers about what is the actual profitability of this salesperson, at least profitability contribution, took a lot of work. There was a lot of modeling, a lot of getting the data right, a bunch of sort of sorting through business rules, working with the business managers and the owners of these areas to figure out what's the right way to represent this and then do that correctly in the data. It seemed obvious when they were laying out the requirements to us. Okay, that sounds simple enough. But when we got down to building it, we realized, there's a lot more to it. And that's a pretty common thing we find. And in fact, in order to make the report or dashboard as simple as possible and as effective as possible, you often end up with those complexities behind the scenes to get them really good and make sure they're validated and that type of thing. You were mentioning a different example. I think it was point-in-time accounts receivable or AR reporting. That's one that you've worked on a number of times. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, definitely. So, point-in-time AR is a bit of a word that strikes some fear into some people where, you just want to see at what point in time did this customer, what did they owe? What was the aging at? And so in general, some ERPs have a way to go back in time and say, as of last month, what did my top customer owe? Others don't have that ability at all. You can only see your current AR zero analysis. So it's one of those things where the back end work is more than you would think, right? So there's 2 ways to really accomplish it. One is the kind of easier way, which is to just simply take a snapshot of your data. So you just say, what's my AR right now? Okay, I'm going to take a copy of that. I'm going to put it over here, and then I'm going to stack them all on top of each other. The one issue with that is people make mistakes, right? Somebody will enter the wrong they'll put an extra zero on the end of a check or something, that comes in. That's a huge difference.
And so they'll have to go back and correct that, but your snapshot
Yeah.
maybe doesn't get it.
It's solid. It's stuck in time.
Yeah.
So, where a lot of the complexity will come is you ideally want to avoid those mistakes.
Of course.
And so what you can do is, you actually go look at like, okay, here are my invoices, here are my payment history. I'm going to merge these two up. I'm going to recreate history over time. And what that does is when somebody makes an update, it also updates your history.
It fixes it.
And that can be quite complicated. You have invoices, credit memos, returns, all kinds of different transactions that can go into it that you need to figure out, how do I handle these specific transactions? What do I need to ignore, et cetera? That turns into a bit of a back and forth. And a lot of times we'll kind of show data to the customer that they didn't even know was happening. They'll be shocked by it.
It is interesting. So you do all that work. The snapshot does seem pretty straightforward, but there's still some implementation issues. Doing it the way to reconstruct it so that you catch those changes is a lot more complicated. The end result, though, often looks pretty simple. You might see AR balance over time on a line chart. You might want to be able to see, how does that balance change by the buckets, the aging buckets.
Yeah.
So my 30 to 60 days, how's that bucket changing? How's my 60 to 90 day bucket changing? That type of thing. It looks simple on the page, but to make that happen really well can be really challenging. You can get your DSO out of it. And how is my DSO changing over time? Again, usually a pretty simple line chart, but the engineering that goes into the back end to make that happen and to make it, actually correct and useful takes a lot of work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So another example we thought of was price volume mix. This is a pretty common thing that people want to see. How are changes in price and changes in mix, changes in volume? How are all those things affecting our top line, our sales? And so very often that chart or report looks like a waterfall chart. Pretty simple chart to look at, simple to interpret. But to get that right on the back end, so it's actually reporting the right data, takes a lot of work. And it usually comes in the form of the fact that every company thinks about those calculations a little bit differently. And so you can't just apply a simple template to that. You really need to go deep with the people in the business that understand the business rules around that, and then code that into both the data modeling and into the measures and the KPIs so that it comes out correctly. This is one where I've definitely had the experience with a client where they're saying, how hard could it be? I'll just drag a waterfall chart onto the table, connect it to the data, and it's there. It's not that simple. There are so many things that can make it go wrong. And in fact, that example I was thinking about, the client, we showed the client an example of that. He said, well, that's not how I want it at all. And then it all sort of clicked. Okay, we need to do all the groundwork to make this come out right. So I guess that's just another example of how that can happen. And this happens all over the place. I mean, maybe not every report. Some truly are simple, but pretty much.
Yeah. And I mean, even to add on to it too is behind all these reports, you have what's called a model, right? It's the backbone of everything. So you're not just building a model specifically for salesperson ROI, specifically for AR. Ideally, you want that thing to be able to be used for other areas of the business too.
Right.
Because part of the issue is, if you have, like in this case, we have 3 different completely separate models. That's a lot of work to keep those updated and maintained over time. So, it's almost like complexity for simplicity, right? You're going to make it a little more complicated to be able to make this thing reusable. However, your future self is going to thank you.
Yeah. It's almost like if you see a complex report, even though they can look pretty and sort of fancy with lots of dials and things going on, it's probably an unfinished report, an untested report. It hasn't been tested in an actual live fire, because if people were using it that way, they would immediately request changes to make it simpler to read. So yeah, complicated in terms of the final view is not necessarily better, almost always worse.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, great. Just wanted to cover that. Thanks for the discussion. It was interesting.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
One final note, if you like our content, what we're discussing here, don't forget to like and subscribe for more to come, or navigate on over to bluemargin.com where we have a history and other useful articles you might like.